On October 24th, 2024, one man tasked himself with watching 50 movies before the dawn of a new year. The rules of this challenge were simple. Watch movies. Old, new, long, or short. It mattered only that he logged them on Letterboxd to verify his progress. On December 31st, 2024, he completed the 50th film. These are the results.
I wanted to do this challenge for a few reasons. The first being that if I could carve out time in my day for movies, then I could probably carve out time in my day for the gym or for studying or other things I probably don't want to do. And the second is movies make me happy. The more movies I watch, the better my mental health is. So, I watched a lot of movies. Also, probably occurred to you that from October 24th to December 31st is actually not 50 days, it's 68. And that's entirely true. It's just not a catchy enough title. This was my first Kurosawa film, and it felt fitting to start the challenge off with one of the most revered films from one of the world's most revered directors, and Jesus, the praise is really well earned here. I mean, after all these years, this movie's still super refreshing to watch. Essentially, 7 men are tasked with defending a village against hordes of raiders for little more than food and honor as their reward. Toshiro Mifune was the highlight of the film for me, and it's pretty plain to see why Kurosawa used him in so many other films. The soundtrack and the visuals display this really diminishing sense of hope as the village defense unfolds. Every victory is celebrated with cheer, and every death is met with silence. The funerals are the best part of the movie for me. They give the viewer time to reflect with the characters on the journey so far and the sacrifices that allowed them to survive, while conveying that more of them may die if the village is to live. 5 out of 5. Though I've seen a few Hitchcock films prior to this, they didn't grab me like Rear Window did. I'm a sucker for claustrophobic films like The Lighthouse or 12 Angry Men, and this is up there with the best of them. A man confined to a wheelchair tries to solve a murder he believes he's witnessed through the window of a neighboring apartment. The suspense and intrigue created from this perspective is masterfully done. Jimmy Stewart's grouchy demeanor in the film, mixed with his extremely distinct manner of speaking, combined to create this charming sleazebag who's not only a terrible boyfriend, but wants to be right more than he wants somebody to be alive. The core concepts in this film are relevant more now than they have ever been. Privacy is a luxury that few can afford, and tragedy is often more interesting than triumph to a general audience, which in itself is a meta-commentary on the audience watching the movie. 5 out of 5. Yes, I watched this because I, like everybody else, loved Parasite, which is done by the same director, and yes, I, like everybody else, loved watching suspected murderous pedophiles get drop-kicked every 30 minutes. 4.5 out of 5. A criminal and a cop kidnap a baby from a family that had quintuplets recently because they can't conceive. That's already a wild plot. Now throw Nicolas Cage in there and have the Coen brothers direct it, and you've actually got a classic. Despite being a pretty overt caricature of the South, I can't help but love the yodeling and the banjo strumming and the sweet southern accents and all. 4.5 out of 5. American Beauty. Okay, here's where the praise train stops. I expected a 5 out of 5, incredible, up there with the greatest movies of all time, and that's simply just not what I got. What an empty film. The movie's message didn't resonate with me after watching it, and there's not a likable character in it. Kevin Spacey is a pedophile, and his character in this is too. Essentially, the point of the movie is trying to make you feel like life is worth living and you should go out there and do something instead of feeling like a plastic bag floating in the wind. But that feels like a pretty largely empty premise when the entire time you're just watching some guy in his midlife crisis try to bang a teen and smoke weed and just a bunch of other things that don't really make you feel like life is worth living. While it has a similar premise to Fight Club in that the 9-to-5 desk jobs kind of rob you of your sense of purpose or fulfillment, it isn't nearly as interesting visually or narratively. Spacey, for as good an actor as he was, is largely bland in this, and I get that that's the point, but it's just not interesting. I can't help but find him completely unrelatable or void of anything resembling like a regular person. Again, he's this boring drone who just gets high and wants to bang a teenager, and that doesn't really communicate the "go live life, it's worth living" message very well. While there's a nice shot here or there, or the occasional iconic scene, the overall film's just not what I expected. 3 out of 5. Overall, pretty standard coming-of-age story. I'm sure that if I watched this movie as a teenager, I would have loved it, or at least liked it a whole lot more. But given the fact that I graduated high school almost 5 years ago now, it's just kind of hard for some of that stuff to stick with me in that way. Ezra Miller surprisingly had my favorite performance in the movie, even if he's just like a quirky class clown character. The soundtrack was pretty good, but other than that, I don't really see myself watching this one again anytime soon. 3 out of 5. Alright, let's start here. This is the greatest comic book movie ever made. It's not the closest to resemble the comics. It doesn't have Heath Ledger. But it's the best. The soundtrack from Michael Giacchino is just enthralling. His main theme is this haunting, dramatic piano ballad that increases the tension to the point that you feel like you accidentally missed the trash can and Batman is looming nearby. Pattinson is this grungy, somber loner who takes out his anger on anyone he feels deserves it. By the end of the movie, he sees that anger and vengeance aren't what he should stand for, and instead he should stand for hope and justice in Gotham. Paul Dano's Riddler is so funny in this movie too. Making him like this incel Reddit loser really translates his like eccentric, larger-than-life personality that nobody really cares about. And honestly, the Batman scenes in this are just so raw. You have the GCPD escape and the Penguin chase, and on top of that, you have the assault on the goons in the stadium. It's just some of the coolest things Batman has ever done in any medium. I, like everybody else, genuinely cannot wait for a sequel to this film. Every time it gets delayed, a piece of me dies, but I understand that hopefully, in the long term, it's going to make it an overall better movie. And I wouldn't be mad if they brought it into James Gunn's DCU. 5 out of 5. Yojimbo. Much like Seven Samurai, this was another refreshing film from Kurosawa. The main character is played by Toshiro Mifune, and again is the best part of the film. He's this wandering samurai that tries to play both sides of a gang war in this small town, and the way that he goes about it is really interesting, and he still kind of hides his true nature to the audience, which is a very compelling thing to watch. I really enjoyed the dark, ironic humor in this movie. The Coffin Maker being like super distraught during peacetime only to become the most annoying, happy person when everybody starts dying in the gang war was just a really funny way to display the natural order of the working world in this town. 4 out of 5. I watched 4 classic Bond films during this challenge and had to start with the very first one. Okay, all of the movies that I saw were largely the same. They're charming, they're cheesy, occasionally sexist or racist, but overall they're just kind of like fine. Goofy gadgets and a classic soundtrack and increasingly better stunts are pretty much what you're signing up for when you watch the Bond movies. Sean Connery holds a lot of charisma in the role of James Bond, and it's clear why they kept him for 7 movies. That being said, I much prefer watching Austin Powers. 3.5 out of 5. Pussy Galore's Flying Circus. Pure gold. 3.5 out of 5. There's an entirely underwater fight scene in this movie that's pretty sick to watch, but they did shoot a couple live sharks for the movie, so not a fan of that. 3 out of 5. The Spy Who Loved Me. This was the only Roger Moore Bond movie that I watched, and while I don't find him to be as charismatic as Sean Connery, he's still a decent Bond. Jaws, the adversarial iron-mouthed malcontent, was definitely the best part of the movie for me, though. 3.5 out of 5. Keeping in theme with spy thrillers, the first Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise was a fun watch. There are plenty of iconic moments in this movie, but Cruise or Ethan Hunt being rappelled down to interact with a computer is easily the best. And that soundtrack is killer. It's so classic. It has that 60s feel to it, and even though you've heard it a kabillion times, it still feels like fresh and intriguing and exciting, and it's adrenaline pumping, and there's espionage. It's just like a perfect spy soundtrack. And while this was the only Mission Impossible I watched during this challenge, I'm definitely going to catch up on the others before the final film comes out this year. 4 out of 5. Kubrick is known for being a weird, aggressive douchebag of a director, but the guy can make a film. This Rags to Riches tale is easily one of the best looking movies I've ever seen. You just kind of have to see it to believe. I mean, god damn, do you see this coat? 5 out of 5. As far as claustrophobic films go, this is one of my favorites. While it's not a horror movie, Forcing all these characters to interact with each other based purely on circumstance is what makes it so compelling. A cramped room with 12 members of the public. It's hot, the fans don't work, everyone has a life to go back to, a baseball game to catch, a wife they miss, and yet they all have to be here. And someone's life is in their hands, whether they like it or not. I'm pretty fond of Henry Fonda in this. He's casual in demeanor but driven to defend a man's life. And while it's a cliched story, it's definitely the one that inspired so many others to take after it. I loved this movie so much the first time that I watched it that before it even ended, I bought the Blu-ray Criterion that I still haven't even taken out of the sleeve yet. 5 out of 5. I can't believe this is what Obi-Wan was up to before he became a Jedi. This is an amazing horror film. It's a brutally honest look at drug addiction and how easy it is for an addict to convince themselves that what they're doing is justified in any way, shape, or form. Obi-Wan in this is fantastic too. The fear he displays when he's fiending for some more versus the ease he shows when he's high out of his mind on death sticks is just really great range. This and American Beauty have very similar messages. Go live life. Do something with your life. Life is worth living. And yet this one actually shows you why that's important and why life is worth living at the end of the day. American Beauty just didn't do that. 5 out of 5. 10 Things I Hate About You. This is another pretty standard coming-of-age rom-com, but this has to be Christopher Nolan's favorite movie ever. He's casted so many people in this in some of his biggest movies to date. 10 Things I Hate About You, more like 3 out of 5. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. As heart-wrenching and sad as this movie can be, I wish it leaned into it more instead of occasionally becoming a comedy. Jim Carrey in this is absolutely amazing, and Mark Ruffalo just kind of pisses me off. 4 out of 5. I like summarizing this movie as how much praise somebody can give their biggest rival. The main character in this blames God for giving him the ability to recognize pure brilliance when displayed, but not the talent to create it. The premise alone is phenomenal, but this 3-hour-long epic is a visual marvel that deeply depicts how thin the line between hatred and love can really be. 5 out of 5. What the fuck? 4 out of 5. As a massive fan of the anime, I was greatly looking forward to this one, and it did not disappoint. The action, the soundtrack, the characters, they're all as good as they've ever been. And Cowboy Bebop is a large reason that I enjoyed dubbed over subbed. Stephen Blum was born to play Spike Spiegel, even if the character was written in a language he doesn't speak. 4 out of 5. Substance and spousal abuse are two very big topics to tackle in a movie, and I feel like this one was spread a little too thin trying to substantially speak about both. While I enjoyed the chemistry between Stewart and O'Brien, the overall movie just didn't grab me the way I thought it would. 3.5 out of 5. The Beguiled. I watched this, girlfriend, because my movie made me do it, and it's alright. 3 out of 5. This eccentric black and white sugar mama drama was the launching point for a number of industry cliches, and still 70 years later is phenomenal. True cinema. 4.5 out of 5. The basic idea here is life is like the internet, or Japanese Blade Runner, or what does it mean to be a person? Probably all three. 4 out of 5. Clocking in at 45 minutes, this was easily the shortest movie that I had watched during the challenge, but the amount of insane stunts Buster Keaton does in this is astounding. Running on top of a moving train, water skiing on a Model T, jumping into a briefcase, and riding on a motorcycle's handlebars for an excess of 5 minutes, only to find out 9 years later that he broke his neck while filming this? What a freak. 4.5 out of 5. When me and my buddies heard that there would be an IMAX re-release of Nolan's visually crowning achievement, we jumped at the bit to go see the first screening. And we saw the second one. This is a modern sci-fi classic. Occasionally the dialogue drags a little long, or they just outright say the point of the movie. Those are minor gripes, and that's the only thing preventing it from being a perfect film for me. The score from Hans Zimmer is a modern marvel. Then you get these unbelievable views of our universe captured by Hoyt van Hoytma, and I mean, just look at this. Look at that! No, seriously, how does somebody make a movie look this good? Then you got McConaughey, Hathaway, Chastain, Kane, Damon. There's so many good performances in this too. This movie is amazing. 4.5 out of 5. So I forgot to talk about Gladiator. Gladiator's great, there's no doubt about that. Russell Crowe's performance in it is amazing, but some of the slow motion doesn't work for me. Some of the scenes are drawn out for a little too long, and it's just not Ridley Scott's best movie. 4 out of 5. September 5. I caught a mystery movie with my girlfriend, and it turned out to be this. It's about the Israeli-Palestinian hostage crisis during the 1972 Olympics, where a Palestinian terror group kidnapped a number of Israeli athletes and executed them. Spoiler alert. It's fine as a movie, but the obviously one-sided narrative makes it seem like it's trying to garner sympathy for the Israeli people during a time where they're actively committing a genocide against another people. Free Palestine, 3 out of 5. Gladiator 2 leans way too much on the first film. Denzel is great, though. 3 out of 5. This movie's filled with incredible lines and gorgeous visuals. Choosing between your husband and your childhood crush shouldn't be that hard until you throw the fish out of water element into it, and all of a sudden you have to choose between the two worlds that you've existed in for your entire life, and now you've got a really compelling film. 4.5 out of 5. Everything that was basic and formulaic about A New Hope, scratch that. The villain wins, the main character gets beat up the entire time, and Han Solo's probably dead. On top of that, you've got the Vader reveal. This movie is Star Wars at its best. This is why I am such a massive fan of Star Wars. This is incredible sci-fi storytelling at its peak. 5 out of 5. A Fish Called Wanda. This felt like if Smosh the movie and The Usual Suspects had a baby in the 80s. 3.5 out of 5. Can you imagine listening to your grandma drone on for about 3 hours about the guy she used to freak with on the ship famously known for sinking? I mean, the movie's alright, but that's just such a strange way to tell that story. 3.5 out of 5. Smile 2. Not as bad as I thought it would be. Some really interesting and trippy visuals here. 3 out of 5. Probably the least Scorsese movie that I've seen. The main character is bouncing around from girl to girl, constantly scared one of them's gonna kill themselves if he leaves, which is a funny premise, but I just didn't really feel perfectly executed to me. 3.5 out of 5. Kraven the Hunter, absolutely steaming pile of cockamamie bull. Kraven has 4 different accents in this movie, is randomly afraid of spiders, gets shot by his dad, a lion bleeds into the bullet hole, drinks a potion, and that gives him the power to, and I'm not kidding you, zoom in on various objects including license plates and cigarettes. And he doesn't actually hunt in the entire film. He just tells you that he's a hunter, shows up, and kills people. It's hilarious! 1 out of 5. If there was a movie smoother than this, I ain't seen it yet. This movie rules. 4 out of 5. This is one of the most depressing movies that I've ever seen. Patriotism, glory, and erroneous awe send the youth into a fruitless experience that robs them of their happiness. The walls continue to close in on this young boy as the innocent around him died during the events of World War II. The daunting sound of the Nazis' laughter as they burned dozens of people in a matter of seconds horrifies me. The brutal honesty of the horrific efforts of the Nazis is nauseating. And add on to that their cowardly insistence that it wasn't their fault and they were only doing what they're told as they demand a mercy that they never gave. This movie makes you feel a deep, unbridled hatred for a period since past. I hate this movie in every way, and I hate the way that it makes me feel because it's absolutely perfect. This is one of the most effective movies I've ever seen. 5 out of 5. Juror number 2. While it's sad that this movie didn't get a theatrical release, given it was Eastwood's last cinematic effort, I can kind of understand why. Not to say that it's bad, it's a decent movie, but it just didn't really stick with me the way that I wanted it to. For a movie about learning you may have murdered somebody while attending jury duty, I was really hoping to see the walls close in on the main character's guilty conscience, or even to see him dip back into substance abuse to try and cope with it. 3 out of 5. Contrary to popular opinion, this is actually pretty low on my Tarantino list. Not to say that the movie's bad, I actually love it, but I just don't enjoy it as much as his other movies. There's some really fun performances in this, some great quotables, and even a terrifying performance from Christoph Waltz. The voiceovers take me out of the movie, and some of the shots do as well, but aside from that, it's an awesome movie. 4.5 out of 5. The choreography and stunt work from Jackie Chan is beyond impressive here. Watching him do martial arts with coat racks before sliding down a pole covered in Christmas lights for several stories is awe-inspiring to say the least. Unbelievably dangerous to be sure, but CGI has robbed us of a lot of potentially groundbreaking stunt work like that present in this film. 4 out of 5. I admire Jon Favreau. His ability to kickstart the MCU with Iron Man and single-handedly revive Star Wars with The Mandalorian is undeniably impressive. Before all that, he was in an episode of The Sopranos. And a little after that, he created Elf. Funny, endearing, and above all, a true embodiment of the Christmas spirit. 4 out of 5. As a massive fan of Robert Eggers, Nosferatu was easily my most anticipated movie this year, and this movie is nuts. These gorgeous gothic set pieces really immerse you in this fictitious Victorian town in the fight against their horny haunter. Willem Dafoe, Nicholas Hoult, Ralph Fiennes, Lily Depp Rose, Bill Skarsgård, Aaron Taylor Johnson. Everybody in this movie is at their best. And Dafoe is my highlight, as he usually is. He has some of the best line deliveries in this. Like when he screams,
"I have seen things in this world that would have made Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb."
The first act of the film takes a little bit of time to really pick up, but once it did, I was completely locked in. There are a few sequences in this in which a shadow crawls across the screen and interacts with the world around it, and it's just jaw-dropping. It's the coolest thing to watch. And while it's not my favorite Eggers film, Nosferatu did not disappoint. 4.5 out of 5. For a movie about the ups and downs of celebrity and how harmful the taste of fame can be, it never really gets honest about it. The band does an assortment of awful things in this. It's like substance abuse, trade groupies with other bands, catcall high schoolers, and lie to the press. But by the end of the movie, you're just supposed to be like, oh, they're still redeemable. It's an okay movie, but the message is just really confused at best. 3.5 out of 5. How the guy that made these movies ended up making The Joker will kind of always confuse me, but this movie's really fun. I thoroughly enjoy it. 4 out of 5. This is one of the most inaccessible movies I've ever tried to watch. There are 7 different versions of this movie, 3 of which you have to choose between on streaming or renting services, and it's still awkward trying to figure out which one you should watch. This being my second time watching it, I opted for the final cut instead of the director's cut, which I watched my first time, and Jesus Christ, this movie's amazing. The retro-futuristic sci-fi noir adjective noun is one of the coolest and yet most bleak stories ever brought to screen. The techno-jazz soundtrack blaring through the neon-illuminated smog that coats its provocative story. What does it mean to be human? Do we take life for granted? Is the point of life to experience and soon forget? Is Deckard a replicant? How the hell did Denis Villeneuve make a better Blade Runner movie than this? 5 out of 5. As a lifelong Wallace and Gromit fan, seeing these two return to the big screen in nearly 2 decades was just a really nice full circle moment. The visual comedy achieved with the gorgeous stop motion animation is just special. The flightless faux feathers McGraw is the heart of the movie. His expressionless mannerisms communicate just the funniest bits. Donning a red rubber glove and being mistaken for a chicken constantly is a bit 3 decades old, and it still gets me every time. While some of the story left a little to be desired, the overarching theme of not letting technology run unchecked was a perfect sentiment to communicate with this handmade gem of a series. 4 out of 5. At times an intriguing, mind-melting story about what's real, and at others it's just a higher-class Schwarzenegger flick. 3.5 out of 5. Okay, I had to make this last one special. This is a personal favorite of mine in recent history, just based on vibe alone. The chemistry between DiCaprio and Pitt is palpable. Their ability to riff off of each other as though they had been genuine friends for decades is just so much fun to watch. The way the soundtrack and environments immerse you in this bygone era of Hollywood is seamless. Bring a Little Lovin' by Los Bravos is one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack, and it gives me such an adrenaline rush. Not too long after the movie came out, I got a speeding ticket while listening to it. The bending of genre here is incredible. It's a buddy comedy, period piece, drama, thriller, all rolled into one, and I think that seamless blending of genres is what makes Tarantino one of the greatest. The quiet, unsettling tension created when Cliff enters Spawn Ranch is excellently directed. Add in the historical context of the Manson family and their murderous, cultish ways, and it heightens the fear even further. So many great line reads in this, too.
Sorry about that. Here, put these on. Don't cry in front of the Mexicans.
I tried. You're Rick f***ing Dalton. Don't you forget it.
You're drinking all night. Drinking again. 8 goddamn whiskey sours.
This meta take on Hollywood and its polarizing highs and lows is as much a love letter to the industry as it is a dire warning to those unfamiliar with the cutthroat nature of the business. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has slowly come to overtake Pulp Fiction as my favorite Tarantino film, and with this last rewatch, it solidified its spot at the top. This is one of the greatest movies ever made. 5 out of 5. And here I am completing the final step of this challenge, which was to turn this entire concept into a YouTube video. I hope you enjoyed what you just watched. I'm so sorry that you sat through that entire thing. But there's some other videos of mine that I've probably made months ago that maybe you've seen at this point. If you haven't, go check them out. And subscribe while you're here. I upload not often. Later.